Welcome. Good morning. On behalf of the Terner Center team and our partners at NYU Furman, I wanted to welcome you all to our conference, From Scarcity to Abundance, Research and Strategies for Housing Policy. My name is Ben Metcalf. I'm the Managing Director of the Terner Center, and it's my real pleasure to kick us off today. We do have an action-packed agenda with lots of interesting topics to cover and some stellar speakers. But we will be looking to all of you to also make this a vibrant and interesting discussion. So take a look at the center of your tables. You'll see a stack of index cards and pens. This is old school. But we'll count on you all as we go through the day to be writing your reflections, comments, and questions on those cards, and then handing them to roving folks of team members to hand up to pass to moderators at the panels, and actually also to inform a write-up of this event that we plan to put out later this year, offering up some reflections that have emerged out of this collective conversation. In addition, I should note that we are recording this event. There is no live stream. We wanted to get you all here in the flesh, but we do plan to make the recordings available subsequently as part of the follow-on paper that we do coming out of this. Wonderful. So I want to actually invite Seyron up on the stage. He's going to introduce our keynote speaker. A little context on Seyron before he does that. He is a senior program officer at the Hilton Foundation, where he oversees, among many things, the foundation's homelessness portfolio. I should note he's also a Cal alum. Can't let that slip given where we're located. We are super lucky to have him here with us today representing Hilton. He's been a true thought partner for us as we've thought about what we wanted to achieve with this event and with our collaboration on this topic. Hilton has been a core partner for us over the last couple of years, and we're grateful to have them as sponsors. In fact, I should say it was on Seyron and Hilton's invitation that we actually decided that it made sense in many ways to host this conversation here in LA of all places. And I would note also that for Hilton as a philanthropic organization committed to the work in their backyard in LA, committed particularly to work on the topic of homelessness, it wouldn't have been an obvious choice to have a national conference on housing supply, but I think it's really credit to their leadership and their ability to sort of see the interconnectedness of those topics that they were all in on making this happen. And lastly, I'd just like to note that Seyron, like his colleagues at Hilton, really do get that without research, without reflection, and all the messiness that comes with that, with measuring, evaluating, assessing our policies, we can't succeed. We certainly will fall shy of the goals that we set if we can't measure them well, and do a disservice to those who are struggling out in the streets or trying to make ends meet as renters or homeowners. So thank you for that leadership. It definitely matters. Seyron, please come on up.
Thank you, Ben, for that warm introduction. I've known Ben now since, when we were in Sacramento leading a delegation of philanthropy several years ago, and he was head of the housing department. And when the opportunity came to work together with the Terner Center again, we said yes. And I have to apologize for the sound of the hoarseness of my voice. Like some of you, I may have been at the Taylor Swift concert last night. And so bear with me as I make my remarks today and introduce our fabulous speaker, who I can assure you can swing dance better than Taylor Swift. So Taylor Swift is a strange way to start for a conference like this. There's less pink, I can tell you, and less cowboy hats here today. But I think there's some important lessons for us to think through, and more importantly, for us to think through how we bring the energy and spirit of being together here for today's conversation that Ben alluded to. Yes. Ben, in fact, told me that he's going to host a conference after the Beyonce concert at SoFi Stadium now, too. So to the Terner Center and to Ben and Carol for your leadership and partnership, we're grateful to be in this community of practice with you. So, as I mentioned, it's a privilege and honor to join you this morning as we launch into critical conversations and research about how we work together to connect people experiencing homelessness to permanent housing. The Conrad and Hilton Foundation is committed to realizing a Los Angeles where homelessness is rare, brief, and non-reoccurring. Homelessness is solvable. And we know that homelessness is a housing problem. Los Angeles, and indeed California, must dramatically expand our housing supply, and too many Angelinos, over half, are rent burdened, and that is simply unacceptable. The homeless response system in Los Angeles has stepped up, housing more than 22,000 people every year to permanent housing. But it cannot connect people to permanent housing alone without housing. And that is the quandary we find ourselves here in Los Angeles. And how do we address the larger land use and regulatory barriers to get us closer to where we need to be? And equally important, to do so in a way that aligns with our values of equity, affordability, and sustainability. To answer these questions, we need evidence-based policy grounded in reality, not in delusions. And that's where Terner Center and so many of you have been crucial partners to the field to produce research with innovative and timely solutions. Now, I have to boast a little bit about the Terner Center in terms of the recent papers that they've published, including the assessment of Senate Bill 35, 5 years on, and the research on permanent supportive housing operating cost models as a key seminal efforts to make recommendations for policymakers that will affect real change. These are not reports that sit on the shelf that go unread. I remember my time as a staffer in the state legislature, and there were always many reports that would come into our offices. And the reports that stood out were the ones that had actionable items, and that has been a hallmark of what the Terner Center has done. Additionally, Terner Center's Housing Lab program has supported innovative, equitable housing solutions across the United States, and specifically here in Los Angeles. This includes increasing the use of underutilized housing for community college students experiencing homelessness through LA Room and Board, a partner of the Hilton Foundation as well. So we have a great day ahead of us. Panels on topics including pro-housing designations and affordable housing. And before I introduce our speaker, I want to go back to Taylor Swift. Because, well, why not, right? So what I found last night, and I see here in comparison, is that there is the power in belonging, the power in being together, and the power in having a shared mission to do something great. Last night, that shared mission was to sing very loudly and to cause another mini earthquake like they did in Seattle. This shared mission today, the power of being together, is so that Californians can realize the Californian dream and have the dignity of a home. And to get us there closer, I'm so excited to introduce our keynote speaker, Jenna Hornstock. Jenna is the Deputy Mayor of Housing for the City of Los Angeles. She previously served as the Deputy Director of Planning for Land Use at the Southern California Association of Governments, where she oversaw its housing and economic empowerment, inclusive economic growth, and sustainable and resilient development departments. She has spent more than 2 decades in local government with a focus on public-private real estate transactions, affordable housing policy and delivery, and community and economic development. Her experience includes working for LA Metro and the Community Redevelopment Agency of the City of Los Angeles. I've been amazed at Jenna's willingness to embrace innovation and challenge the norms, while also managing to keep all of us in line with government rules. She's a self-professed good government bureaucrat, but what I would say is that she is an innovator willing to make the necessary changes to get us closer. More importantly, I think, she was at Pilates at 6 a.m. this morning, and I am just stunned by that. But welcome to Los Angeles. That is what I have to say. That is how Angelinos do it, 6 a.m. classes. So with that, Jenna, welcome. Thank you so much.
All right, I'm a little shorter than Taylor Swift, so I'm going to have to pull this down. All right, good morning, everybody. I was indeed at Pilates at 6 a.m., so I've been up for a while, but I've had a lot of coffee. And that is very Los Angeles, but here I am representing the mayor, so why not bring a little Los Angeles? So I am so thrilled to be here as your keynote, and thank you to the Terner Center, the Hilton Foundation, the Furman Center, and UCLA for putting this on today and having me here. I just have to say, a lot of familiar faces in the audience, and in my 20 plus years as a proud bureaucrat working on housing and housing policy and development, I've worked with so many of you, and now I get to stand here before you representing Mayor Karen Bass as her Deputy Mayor of Housing. So I like to take a moment and just really be excited by that and say, wow, I get to represent you in this way. So given the nature of this crowd, I'm sure a lot of you read about and been following in social media, in old school newspapers and blogs, or you're talking to your colleagues about what we've been doing. But my intention over the next 10 minutes or so, and I didn't start my timer, I try to keep myself on task, is to really talk through what we've been doing in our first 7 months or so, where we're headed with our priorities, what we've learned in these 7 months, where we're going forward. And then importantly, because I take good directions, I need to drop in the role of research and how important research is and how it can work with us going forward and how we rely on the work that'll come out of your discussions today. I'm going to talk about our efforts to end unsheltered homelessness, which are really, focused on encampment resolution. But given again that this is kind of my housing policy nerd production crowd, I'll talk about the homelessness, but I'm really going to focus in on the housing side of our work. So you get a little bit of both, or more on the housing, a little bit on the homelessness. So from the mayor's first day in office, she's called on our federal, state, county, and local partners, which includes philanthropy and academia, to lock arms with us urgently around our crisis of homelessness. The fact is, we are facing a life and death emergency when we have well over 40,000 Angelenos unhoused, and 5 unhoused people are perishing on our streets every day. We are responding to this crisis with urgency and with unity. On her first day in office, the mayor issued an unprecedented emergency declaration on homelessness, and she gathered the emergency management team. And then we started issuing our executive directives. So I'm going to walk you through executives 1, 2, and 3, which really have shaped our first 6 months or so in office as they set the stage for where we're headed. And I'm going to take these out of order and start with ED2, because that is specifically focused on encampment resolution and unsheltered homelessness. So I'm going to talk a bit about that and where we're headed with that work. So ED2 launched Inside Safe, which is a citywide, proactive, housing-led strategy to assess street homelessness across Los Angeles and then proactively engage with people living in tents and encampments, and it's based on which locations are most chronic and where people are most in crisis. Our office has locked arms with the county, with the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, or LAHSA, which, if you don't know, is our joint powers authority of the city and the county. And we've had really strong support from our city council and our city administrator's office to launch this aggressive and innovative program. We identify encampments, and our outreach teams go out ahead of time to assess the encampment, to meet the individuals there. We tell them what will be coming and what will be offered to them, and we make it voluntary. So the day when our teams go out to do the encampment resolution, we show up with our service providers, we do intake, we offer a bus ride to a motel. We provide motel vouchers and wraparound services on site. To date, we have cleared 23 encampments across 13 of our council districts, and we've brought over 1,400 people inside from the streets. We partner with our sanitation department on these efforts, and we have removed over 200,000 pounds of waste. And what I think what's important and what's different that's been happening is we've had clearing of waste from streets and debris, but it comes back. But this time the encampments aren't coming back, and so we're clearing our streets for public use again. No arrests have been made in this process, in any of these encampment resolutions. With our budget that was approved in May for this fiscal year, we have $250 million set aside to continue with Inside Safe and grow this work. So I'm going to spend a few more minutes just talking a little bit more about how we're expanding our homelessness programs and our work around encampment resolution. First, we've enacted a partnership just last week with the county and with LAHSA to use $7.8 million of the opioid and tobacco settlement funds, and we'll be reimbursing providers for additional time and services that are not covered by existing federal and state funding. So what happens is those that have substance abuse and mental health disorders that are in rehab facilities generally gets covered for about 90 days, and then they're back out, and hopefully they've got some access to services. But the reality is 90 days is not always enough to get people inside, to get them sober if they want, to get them stable. And so what we're doing is we're going to step in and expand those services so that we can help get people ready for permanent housing. We also partnered with the county and were awarded a $60 million encampment resolution grant from the state. So thank you to our state partners who are here. And that is focused on bringing 3,000 people inside from Skid Row over the next 3 years. So we're having a focused effort on Skid Row. We're also launching this month an RV task force to develop a citywide strategy on resolving RV encampments, which offer a different set of both kind of legal and other challenges in terms of how you approach resolution. We are also laser focused on processes that we need changing. In particular, what we've learned, and probably again you've seen in the media, is we bring people into motels, and we are so blessed that we have thousands of units of permanent supportive housing opening up because of HHH and its success. And yet we're finding that it's difficult to actually move people from our interim housing, and that's Inside Safe, it's our bridge homes, it's our tiny home villages, into those units, even though it's all within the city and we have funded these units. So this is my first research drop idea, right? Looking into CES, our coordinated entry system in LA, and the county more broadly, and looking at its impacts. It was put in place with good intention, but what we're seeing is that it's not quite working how we'd hoped it to be. We're seeing longer timeframes of moving people. We see vacancies in our permanent supportive housing, and interestingly and terribly, we're seeing an impact on people of color and less ability to be able to move in some of our most vulnerable, most at need, unsheltered individuals. So good idea for some research there. So that was a very kind of condensed, quick overview of our work to date on homelessness and where we're headed in the coming year. So I'm going to turn toward talking about EDs 1 and 3, and we're going to get deeper into the housing production and land use side of things. So I know that you all know, and we know from research out there from many different institutions that time is money when it comes to real estate projects. And for affordable housing, one of the biggest barriers that we see over and over is the entitlement process, right? Projects get held up. The delays cost money, interest rates go up, construction costs go up, there are risks. So ED1 exempted 100% affordable projects from discretionary review processes if the project is consistent with the underlying zoning, and we commit to 60 days for approvals. And I'm looking at you, Vince Bertoni, well done to the planning department, because to date there are over 400 projects qualified under ED1, over 8,500 units. We have approved 22 projects through LA City Planning. That's just over 1,600 units, and the average that I saw the other day was 45 days. So let that sink in. We've gone from about 6 months for planning approvals to 45 days. That is serious time savings, and importantly, certainty that developers get when they come into this process. Even more exciting is the city loves ED1, and in June, the City Council took action to make ED1 permanent, and they've directed the Department of City Planning to start work on this permanent ordinance that will codify this executive directive, which we expect that it'll happen by the end of this calendar year. So I just want to have a moment of recognizing this amazing change, and so many researchers and others have called for this change to happen, and it's coming. Before I move off of ED1, I want to note that a lot of folks have asked if we will extend it to mixed income projects, the next horizon. How do we make it more? And I can say we are exploring expansion of ED1 to mixed income. I think the challenge, as most of you know, is you have to make sure you can implement these things. So expanding it and the streamlining, we need to make sure that we can roll this out successfully, and our departments are looking at that, and we are very supportive of that direction. So I'll move on to ED3, Executive Directive 3, and that's our focus on using a critical asset that we have, which is land, toward homelessness and housing solutions. So we worked across our departments to generate a list of publicly owned land that can be considered surplus or available for development. Our team sorted through 3,300 parcels, which was a lot of fun for them, to identify which are suitable for interim or permanent housing. And after this initial review and looking at how we approach our development of housing in our lands, what we ended up recommending in our office is we take a moment to be bigger and bolder and to really rethink how we utilize city parcels and financing resources to scale up development of affordable housing on publicly owned land. We know that development of city lands require significant investment of time and staff hours from the city and our departments, but also from the development community. You've got consultants, you've got your architects, you've got your lawyers. It can take about 5 years each to get these projects done. If you're lucky, a little less, but sometimes a bit more. I've been fortunate in my public sector career to have worked on at least maybe 24 RFPs in different public agencies for publicly owned land. And again, I can tell you, I see places where we can think differently and do it better. And so we released our public lands report on May 15th, and we laid out 3 immediate, medium, and longer term strategies. Immediately, we actually have another partnership with the state, one of our themes, partnership, where they're providing us 500 interim housing units, tiny homes. They're calling them emergency sleeping cabins, whatever the name is. They're providing them, and we are putting those on publicly owned lands. That'll be the first thing you see out the gate. We have also called for the next 6 months some interdepartmental working groups so that we can continue to identify public lands ongoing and keep that list fresh. Just like a new Taylor Swift song, maybe fresh. I'm trying to bring the Taylor Swift into this. I got one more for you on her, and a couple more research drops. And then I think importantly, though, over the next year and a half or so, we've just applied for a pretty large grant to look at how do we scale up development of our publicly owned land. So when we put out our RFPs, and who here has responded to a public sector RFP? I don't know if we have a lot of developers in the room. Yes. So you don't always get all the information you need. Like, what's the zoning path? What's the utility issue on this land? Really, how financially feasible is 100% affordable or whatever it is that we're asking for, ground commercial mixed use. So we want to do that work up front so that we get a good understanding of what we're putting out and what we can expect from the development community. We want to talk to some other public sector partners that are looking at ways to bring their land to the table, and can we build capacity that way? One interesting conversation we had recently with the community college district, who has a fair bit of land to do, not land funding, to do affordable housing development. We also want to do really exciting things like standardize our agreements and our documents, but just, again, how do we make it easier? And importantly, can we bundle sites together? So instead of one site at a time where you might get 75 units, 100, 150 on a good day, we have one bigger one that's several hundred. Can we bundle these sites together and bring in a primary developer with partners so that we're doing more units at once, we're maybe building capacity in our communities to do that work, and we're getting more units, more bang for our buck and for our land. So I should note there's been a fair bit of research and I think ongoing conversation, both in the research and policy world, on social housing. So this might start to sound like social housing, and I think that's great. We're still calling it scaling up development of our land, but I think what's important here is, like a lot of the models we see talked about in the research, we don't have big swaths of land where we could put thousands of units all at once. We have scattered infill sites. So this work we're trying to do is an effort to learn from and to tailor models that are working in other places and see how it works in our city. And I think this is something that could be really scalable and replicable in other cities as well. So again, I'm going to put that out there as another research concept idea to look at, is how's LA going to do on this effort to scale up development of our publicly owned land, and how do we bring that forward in Southern California, where we're looking at infill as really the solution to our housing crisis? So those were the first 3 executive directives. I'm going to spend my last few minutes, that's kind of our first 6 to 7 months, what we've been up to, where are we headed in terms of housing production going forward. So one priority for my team is to create an infrastructure for interim housing. We have all been working with this housing first model for years, and we know it's critical. As we heard, housing is the end to homelessness. The reality, and we're lucky, right? We have thousands of units opening up with HHH, and depending on who you ask, I would say it's been a really successful measure. We are delivering on more than the number of units promised. The issue is, because it takes time to build permanent supportive housing, and because not everybody who is unsheltered is ready to move into that housing right away, we have turned our streets into our waiting rooms. So research question here is, where are the holes in the housing first model, and how do we fill in those holes so that we can end unsheltered homelessness? And one of the ways we're looking at it is to create a permanent infrastructure for interim housing. So my housing team is working closely with our homelessness team to bring down the cost of nightly motel bookings, and ultimately either do leasing of motels, long-term leasing, or we're doing some targeted acquisitions. And I'm going to say, in the great words of Taylor Swift, when you're trying to buy a hotel for interim housing, haters are going to hate a whole lot. A whole lot of hate on that one. I think, this research idea of the impacts of housing first models on unsheltered homelessness is one to think about, and kind of where are we missing and where do we need to fill in those gaps. A couple other areas that research has driven some of the work we're looking at going forward around financing and reinvestment of housing. So we know there's a need to reinvest in and preserve affordable units with expiring covenants. There's been a lot of work in that area at the state level, and we're looking at how do we take some of that research and create programs to recognize it, and I would expand that to include looking at naturally occurring affordable housing, right? The units that are maybe rent controlled or out just on the market, serving lower income folks, but are subject to displacement pressures. We know there's a need to reinvest in our permanent supportive housing stock. I know the Terner Center has done work on that, and Enterprise Community Partners has been leading work in this space. So how do we reinvest in those properties before they, have too much deferred maintenance to continue? And how do we look at the operating subsidies, which we're finding are maybe not quite enough to keep these as viable units? Staying on the theme of permanent supportive housing, our HHH funds are almost gone. And we don't really have much to fill that hole. We have ULA funds, which, as a lot of you know, are right now in litigation. So trying to think about how we have a plan going forward for permanent supportive housing. We should also acknowledge that project-based vouchers have been a staple of operating permanent supportive housing, and we're almost out of them in LA. And so we need to look at both getting more of these critical operating subsidies, but looking at new models. Are there different ways that we can make this work? So a research question could be, do we look at, instead of 100% permanent supportive housing, do we do mixes, right, within our affordable housing portfolios to maybe cross-subsidize and see how this works? So there's a lot of need for analysis and rigorous thought to help us drive how we solve the problems that we know are ahead of us. A couple more things we're looking at around financing is launching an effort to work with banks and other lenders to underwrite to tenant-based vouchers. That's one solution we hear from affordable and market rate mixed income developers is, I will take tenants with Section 8 vouchers or other choice vouchers, but I can't underwrite to those rents. So can we find a way, work with some partners and create a guarantee or a backstop because we can get more into the capital stack and also get more affordability. We also hear kind of similarly with the success of the density bonus, which I'm sure you're going to talk about a whole bunch today. We have density bonus in LA City. We have the very successful transit-oriented communities program, but there we'll get anywhere from 8 to 11% of affordability in those TOC projects. Some of those developers will do more affordability, or the community is asking for it, or the council office is asking for it. We need to provide subsidy if that's going to work. We also have criticism of those projects not using fair labor standards, prevailing wage, et cetera. So can we look at ways to use public subsidies to get more affordability and more multi-benefit outcomes in those projects? So that would be an innovative, different way. Rather than just doing the 100% affordable, can we target our mixed income projects, which also happen to be in a lot of our higher resource communities? So it's another area we're exploring. The last bit is on innovations in construction. The mayor is really interested in us pursuing bringing down the cost and time to deliver housing. And again, we know there's a lot of research in this area, but I got to tell you, I get pitches multiple times a week for the modular, the prefab units. How do we sort through all that and figure out, A, what do we need to do in the city? Do we have barriers in our zoning and our building codes for that? Can we smooth those out? And then how can, again, we use that as part of our public land focus and create some space for innovation and exploring that delivery on our land? So we're hoping to launch an effort that could have an industry forum and some exploration of which models are most successful and that we as the city should partner with. So all of this takes work. It takes thought partners. It takes partnership, and it takes a leap of faith that we can do this. And that's where we're going to be focusing in the next year. We are laser focused on bringing people from encampments to interim housing and into permanent, stable, affordable housing. We know there's more to do and that many of you have a lot of thoughts, ideas, and solutions to share with us. So we welcome your partnership, your thought leadership, your rigorous analysis to help us seize this opportunity and this commitment we've made to bringing people inside fearlessly, aggressively, and tirelessly to end our crisis of housing and homelessness. Thank you.